I met a gypsy.
Yeah, no, I was actually literally saying to Tani Seagrave yesterday that I was so in the mountain biking kind of world when, like, in your prime especially, like that's my era.
Yeah.
And now I like just couldn't, there'd be 50 bike companies I just couldn't even recognize,
Right.
which is crazy to think.
Yeah, I mean, it's always changing, right? Like, all the time. Well, we'll see how many bike companies survive after this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been pretty wild watching just literally the last couple months. Like,
Yeah.
even like Cam Zink did the podcast, and then by the time from recording to releasing it, he literally lost his bike company sponsor, and he just won Rampage. Like, he's one of the biggest names in the sport, and it's just gone like crazy.
Same with Kyle.
Kyle
Straight.
Straight, and that same thing happened. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good riders out there that have lost bike sponsors. Jill and Bryn Atkinson, I know, lost theirs, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely a rough time, and we'll see who survives it. But yeah, I feel bad for those guys, especially their biggest event of the year.
Yeah.
And those companies couldn't have told them like before, maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of sketchy. I mean, what do you do there though? Like, because you could play that both ways, right? So, like, as a sponsor, you go, let's not like mess with his head before the biggest event of the year, like,
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, when the guy wins and then you dump him like a couple weeks later, that's also a pretty bad look as well. So I don't know, like, there's two moral ways to look at it.
Totally. But I mean, I don't know the details about those guys' brands and where they're at now, but I mean, what did it really do for that brand, right?
Exactly.
If they're folding anyways.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I mean, it could be, well, have you ever seen anything like this in the bike industry? Like, you've been around a long time.
I have been around a long time. Yeah, back in 2001, I believe it was, or 2002, I I got on GT after I raced for Volvo Cannondale. Then I went to GT, but it was kind of like the beginning for me where I wasn't actually on the GT team, but I was sponsored by GT for frames. It was kind of like the beginning where I started getting all my own, kind of putting my own team, I guess, together, but it was just me.
Yeah.
But putting all my own sponsors together, but I rode a GT bike. I actually used the GT mechanics and kind of traveled with the factory GT team.
What sponsors did you have on the bike at the time?
I had
and you had some big outside industry sponsors with that when you were doing your own team, or
no,
it was all in mostly inside.
Yeah. I had Fox Clothing.
Yeah.
Bell Helmets, Oakley, Fox Shocks, Maxxis Tires. I don't know. There was a bunch back then.
I remember it just looking so good. Like when you made that switch to GT, and Fox, Oakley, Bell, that, it all looked so clean.
Yeah. That was a good time. I mean, Fox was an awesome company to have as a gear sponsor back then, for sure. Probably one of the best back in the day. But yeah, during that time, I can't remember if it was the first or second or third year. I rode GTs for about 7 years, but at one point, Steve Pete was on the team, and he was kind of like my roommate when we would travel and stuff. And GT went bankrupt. They filed Chapter 11, and everybody on the team didn't get paid the last few months of their salary, and me included. But thankfully for me, that was just like a portion. I don't remember exactly, 40-50% of my overall kind of money that I was bringing in from all my sponsors. Whereas like for Petey,
it was everything.
It was probably 90%. He may have had a few of his own small individual sponsors, but that was his main thing. And so, that was definitely a time I remember where.
But was it industry wide, or was it just GT at the time?
It was just GT that folded, and I don't remember exactly why, but
Yeah, so I guess it has happened in the industry before, but this time around it's like crazy. It seems like it's almost industry wide in a sense, you know. Like it seems like you've got the kind of legacy brands that fairly like independent, but from what I've gathered from like just kind of reading stuff online and trying to listen to certain people talk about it, it seems like it's all these investment groups that came in off the back of like COVID, and the companies making a bunch of cash in COVID, and then they just start making these like year-on-year projections based off the investment companies, and no one in the black companies was like, probably won't keep growing 40% year on year, and then it's like, so I take it that's what's happened, and basically like they've pulled their money out and been like, okay, we're not doing it, and then that leaves the companies folded.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's slightly different for each one of them, right? But I mean, I know across the board, you know, most of the brands are not doing great, right? And I think the stronger are going to survive, but there's definitely a few of those big brands out there that are kind of you know, making this tidal wave happen too, with big sales and stuff like that, right? Like, you know, when certain huge brands are just like discounting everything at 30-40% off, right? Like the little brands, they kind of got to do it too, but then can they really survive, you know, if they're discounting everything at those huge margins? Because, you know, who's going to go buy a little small boutique brand?
We're excited to announce the launch of our new membership site, gypsytales.com, packed with exclusive content and perks that you won't find anywhere else. This is your chance to become a part of the Gypsy Gang. And as a special bonus, if you sign up to an annual membership, you'll be entered into the draw to win our custom-built TC125. Gypsy Gang.